Right, we talked in class or discovered in class a little bit about translating linear functions and how that relates to our point slope form, which we've done so much. So if you think back to what we did in class, how do we translate a function horizontally, vertically, or both? Well, we can use this equation right here, y equals f of x minus h plus k, which moves the graph horizontally h units. Okay, so our horizontal translation is right here, and vertically k units. So our vertical translation then is right here. All right, so there's our equation for translating a function both horizontally and vertically. So let's look at some examples of that. So if I have a parent function, so the original function is called my parent function, or parent equation, f of x equals 2x, so I have a slope of 2. For numbers 1, 2, and 3 here, I want you to describe how that function is being translated. So using that equation that we just came up with, remember k is going to be our vertical translation, and h is going to be our horizontal translation, right? So k is vertical, h is horizontal. So if we look at this first equation, f of x equals 2x plus 5, it doesn't look like I have anything added or subtracted from my x, so it looks like this is just a vertical translation. So I'm adding 5, which is going to be an upward translation. So it looks like I went up 5 units. So my translation was up 5 units. Now if I look at the next one, there's nothing over here. There's no k value, so I'm just going to be using my h value. So it looks like my h value is, well, think about this for a second. Is it 1 or is it negative 1? It looks like this is minus 1, and we usually think of minus as being moved to the left. So should I say left 1? Well, let's think about this for a second. If I think of point slope form, so let's say I have a slope of, let's come down here for a second. So let's say I have a slope of 2, right? Like I have. My equation is 2x. And I want to write an equation in point slope form for the equation that has a slope of 2 and goes through the point 1, 0. All right? Now that's a positive 1, right? So if I'm going to write that equation in point slope form, I'm going to say y plus, now y sub 1 is 0, so I'm just going to ignore that. I don't really have anything there, right? But I'm going to start over here for just a second. All right? So it goes through the point 1, 0. I forgot to write the beginning of my equation. So y equals, I have y equals y sub 1. Now y sub 1 is 0, so I'm going to ignore that. It doesn't add anything to the value of my equation, right? But I'm going to use my slope of 2, right? Same slope, parallel lines. And then I'm going to say x minus x sub 1. Now x sub 1 is 1, so x minus 1. So notice here, this is a positive 1. And here I have minus 1. Right? So this is not a translation to the left. This is actually a translation to the right. So this is right 1 unit. Right? Again, it's a translation to the right because if you remember point slope form, the point of it for the parallel line that I'm going through is 1, 0, positive 1, 0. So even though it says x minus 1, that's a positive 1. It's moving to the right 1. So inside of the parentheses right here, it's going to be the opposite of what you think. All right, so inside of the parentheses, if it says minus, x minus something, that's going to be to the right. So minus is going to be to the right. Now again, this is just with x's. Okay? And plus is going to mean a translation to the left. All right, so make sure you remember that. On the outside, however, this says plus 5. That is up 5. Right, that's still a positive 5, you're moving up 5, but inside of the parentheses, it's the opposite of what you think. All right, so now keeping that in mind, if we look here, looks like we have a translation both horizontally and vertically, because I have an H value, and I also have a K value. All right, so keeping in mind what we said here, again, let's deal with our oh, I shouldn't put that there, that's going to confuse us. So I want to look at my horizontal translation first, which is right here, right? This is my horizontal translation along the x-axis. Now that's a positive 2, it's a plus 2. So what am I going to do? That means, again, the opposite of what you think. I'm translating to the left 2, right? Now I have this minus 4, so there's my k value. That's going to be my vertical translation, or along the y-axis. And that's what we would think. It's minus 4, so it's a translation down 4. All right, we took a look at some patterns when it came to translating functions in class, and we looked at what happens to the equation of this function of f of x if we move it down or up or right or left. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So first of all, here's our rule for translations, whether that's horizontally or vertically. Now remember that a translation is just a slide, right? So I'm moving vertically, horizontally, or both. I can do both of those things. I'm just taking my line, I'm sliding it up or down, I'm sliding it right or left, and I'm looking at the resulting equation. So let's take a look at some of these examples. So for number 1, I have my parent function. So my parent function, or my original function, is f of x equals 2x. So I have a slope of 2, looks like a y-intercept of 0. Right, so what has happened to this function in number 1 if my new equation is 2x plus 5? If I look at my rule up here, it looks like this has only been translated vertically. Okay, so I have h in that rule is going to be my horizontal translation. Right? H is my horizontal translation because that's dealing with my x. So I'm sliding along the x-axis. That's going to be horizontal. And then I have k, which is going to be my vertical translation. That's dealing with my y-intercept, right? So that's going to move up or down along the y-axis. So that's vertical. Right, so again, let's look back at number 1. So it looks like the difference between my parent equation and my new equation, my new function equation, is this plus 5. So is that my h value or is that my k value? Well, it doesn't look like anything has been done here to my 2x or my x value, right? There's nothing in parentheses there. It hasn't moved anywhere. It looks like what I'm dealing with is my k value. So that's a positive 5 or plus 5. Again, that's a vertical translation, so I'm going to guess that plus 5 is moving up the y-axis. So that's going to be a vertical translation of 5. Right, a vertical translation of 5. Right, now let's look at number 2. Number 2, a little bit different. I have nothing here, right? I have no k value that's been added or subtracted. So I'm going to ignore that. But I do have something that's happened here to my x value. And again, my x value is a vertical translation. So if I'm subtracting 1 from x, that's going to slide across the x-axis, which means left or right. Now it looks like originally, well, this is minus 1. So originally I would think that means left 1, right? That makes sense. It's in minus 1, that would move to the left 1. But hold on a second. If I remember my point slope form, right? Y equals y sub 1 plus m, or my slope, is x minus x sub 1, or some point that I've chosen. So if I want to write an equation of a parallel line, translations are going to result in parallel lines, always, right? I'm just moving up or down, right or left, my slope stays the same. So I'm going to write an equation of a parallel line, slope is 2, and I'm going to think of this as, I want to go through the point 1, 0, at 1, 0. So if I think about the equation that I would write for that, right, my slope, so I'm going to start over here, y equals y sub 1. Well, y sub 1 is 0, so I'm not going to worry about that. My slope is 2, so m, oops, my slope is 2, I just said, so 2 times x minus x sub 1. Well, x sub 1 is 1, so x minus 1. Now this is a positive 1, right? But over here, when I put that in point slope form, notice it says minus 1. So my point is right here in your horizontal translation. If it's a minus 1, it's actually going to be a translation to the right. My point here through the point 1, 0 is positive. So inside of the parentheses, it's the opposite of what you would think. That's actually a translation right. 1 unit. Okay, on the outside of the parentheses, it's what you would think. It's naturally plus 5, you're going to think up 5. Inside of the parentheses, though, write this down. Inside of the parentheses, it's the opposite of what you think. It's right 1. It says minus 1, right 1. It says plus 1, left 1. Right, so now let's take a look at this bottom one. It looks like I have both an h value and a k value. So we can think of inside of the parentheses. It's the opposite of what you think. This says plus 2. It's a horizontal translation. So really we could think of it as 2 times x minus negative 2. Right? So I see that negative 2, that's a left. So it looks like I'm going left. 2. And then my k value there on the outside is minus 4, and that's what we think. So it's going to be down 4 units. All right, so let's just do a couple more. Describe how these functions are translated. So I have my original function plus 2. Is that a horizontal or a vertical? That's outside of the parentheses. It's my vertical translation. Plus 2, it's what we think. So up 2 units. Okay, think about number 2 for a second. Again, outside of the parentheses is my vertical translation. Okay, that'd be handy to write down. Outside of the parentheses is vertical, which means inside of the parentheses is going to be horizontal. This is outside, and again, it's what we think. It's down 3. Here we have inside of the parentheses. So again, inside is not going to be horizontal, or sorry, inside is not going to be vertical. Inside is going to be horizontal. Right, so, and again, remember, inside of the parentheses is the opposite of what we think. So we want to think right away, left 9. But it's not left 9, it's moving to the right 9. Right, and again, number 4, the opposite of what we think. That's going to be my horizontal translation. It's going to be left 10. So plus 10, opposite of what we think, left 10. And finally, number 5, I have both. So it's like inside of the parentheses first. Inside is going to be horizontal. So it's going to be right, 2.5. It's the opposite of what we think. And outside of the parentheses is vertical. That's what we would normally think, and that's down 8 units. All right, let's just do a couple more examples. This time we're going to work backwards. All right, so what are these functions going to say if I start with the parent equation, y equals 5x? Okay, I'm actually going to do this as f of x equals 5x. So what is the new equation from this parent equation if I move up 3 units? Again, vertical translation, I'm dealing with y, right? So f of x equals, my parent equation is 5x. And here's where I deal with my vertical translation. Up 3 units, it's just going to give me a plus 3. Right? Number 2, right 7 units. Right is my horizontal translation along my x-axis. So that's going to be inside of my parentheses. So f of x equals, now is this going to be x plus or x minus? Inside of the parentheses, it's the opposite of what you think. This says right, that makes me think plus. But remember, opposite of that is going to be minus 7. Okay, number 3. I'm going to go down to, actually, you know what? Let's skip 3 and 4. Let's just go straight to 5 and 6, because these ones are going to be a combination. It's going to be up or down, it's going to be right or left. Okay, so I have f of x up 2 units, that's going to be my y value, so that's vertical. Right 4 units is going to be my horizontal, so I'm going to start with that. Oops, I made a mistake here, I just realized. I forgot that this was 5x minus 7. Okay, let's go back now to number 5. So f of x. I want to deal with the right translation first. So that's going to be on the inside of my parentheses. Again, my slope is 5. I don't want to forget that. And then this is right 5 units. Remember, inside of the parentheses is the opposite of what you think is going to happen. This says right 4 units. So I'm going to subtract 4. Okay, now moving to my vertical translation, I have up 2 units, which is what we think, plus 2. Okay, one more, number 6. So again, f of x, I'm going to start with. My slope is 5. I want to deal with my horizontal translation first. Left 9. So x plus or minus. Remember, this is inside of the parentheses. I would think originally it was minus. I have to hold on to the opposite of that. So plus 9. And then down 6 is what we think, minus 6.